the air filled with the stench of burning flesh as Petronilla de Meath, a servant girl accused of sorcery, screamed in agony while the flames devoured her. The crowd watched in horror, while her mistress, Lady Alice Kyteler, the accused witch of Kilkenny, slipped away into the shadows, vanishing forever. Some stories from history are so shocking, so unsettling, that they claw their way through the centuries to haunt us. They tell of a time when justice was brutal, faith was absolute, and fear was a weapon. This is one of those stories. It's a tale from 14th century Ireland, a saga of incredible wealth, whispered accusations, and unimaginable cruelty. At the heart of it all is a noblewoman of stunning ambition, a woman who outlived 4 husbands and amassed a legendary fortune. But as her wealth grew, so did a darker legend, a story of poison, demonic pacts, and twisted rituals where the innocent were sacrificed. This is the story of Europe's first real witch trial, a landmark case that set a terrifying precedent for centuries of persecution. This is the story of the infamous Lady Alice Kyteler. But our story doesn't begin with the lady in her castle. It begins in the grime of a dungeon, with a terrified woman named Petronilla de Meath. She was dragged before a crowd, her back bared to the cold Irish air as a heavy, studded whip sliced through her skin 6 times, once for each parish in the city. Her crime? Confessing, under the agony of torture, that her mistress, the impossibly wealthy Lady Alice Kyteler, made sacrifices to demons and could fly. This was the fate of Petronilla de Meath, the first woman burned at the stake for heresy in the history of Ireland. Her horrific end was a spectacle of power and terror, but it was just one piece of a sprawling story of greed for dead husbands, and a trial that would ignite Europe's fear of witchcraft. This is the story of the woman at the center of it all, a figure accused of being a serial killer, a heretic, and the witch of Kilkenny. To understand the storm that swallowed Alice Kyteler, you have to understand her world. The Kilkenny of the early 1300s was a bustling, divided town. It was a Norman stronghold in a Gaelic land, a place of merchants and moneylenders all scrambling for influence under the shadow of the imposing Kilkenny castle. It was a world of sharp divisions, between the English-speaking Normans and the Gaelic Irish, between the authority of the English crown and the rising power of the church. Into this world, around 1260, Alice Kyteler was born. She was the only child of a family of Flemish merchants, giving her a foothold in the world of commerce. From the start, Alice was different. In an age when a woman's power was tied to her husband, Alice had a stunning talent for making her own. She was shrewd, intelligent, and deeply involved in money lending, a business that brought great wealth but also bred deep resentment. Her path to power was paved with a series of advantageous and ultimately fatal marriages. Around 1280, she married her first husband, William Outlaw, a wealthy merchant and a perfect match. They had a son, also named William, who would become a key player in the drama. But after a few years, her husband William got sick and died. Alice, now a wealthy widow, didn't wait long. By 1302, she'd married her second husband, Adam le Blond, another moneylender. Her financial power grew, but so did the whispers. During this marriage, she and Adam were briefly accused of having a hand in her first husband's death, though the charges were dropped. It seemed Alice was collecting enemies as fast as she was collecting riches. And then, Adam le Blond also died. Conveniently, he had signed over his wealth not to his own children, but to Alice and her son, William. To her accusers, a pattern was starting to form. Her third husband, Richard de Meath, was a wealthy landowner. He too died after a few years, and once again, Alice fought fiercely in a legal battle with his son to secure her share of the estate, cementing her reputation as a woman who wouldn't back down. By 1324, Alice, now in her 60s, was on her fourth husband, a knight named Sir John le Poer. At this point, she wasn't just rich, She was a financial powerhouse. Her son, William Outlaw, was a successful banker and one of the city's most influential figures. They were a force to be reckoned with. But when Sir John's health began to fail, his body wasting away, his hair and fingernails falling out, the whispers that had followed Alice for decades erupted into a roar. The children of her 4 husbands, many of whom had been disinherited as Alice's empire grew, saw their chance. They banded together, their shared resentment finally boiling over. They looked at the trail of dead husbands and the mountain of wealth and came to one explosive conclusion. This wasn't just bad luck. It was murder. And it wasn't just poison. It was something far more sinister. It was witchcraft. These accusations might have faded away as just another family squabble over an inheritance, if not for the arrival of one man, Richard de Ladrede, the new Bishop of Ossory. Appointed in 1317, Ladrede was an outsider, an English-born Franciscan who was deeply influenced by the new, radical ideas on heresy circulating at the papal court in Avignon, France. The Pope at the time, John XXI, was obsessed with the idea that witches weren't just practicing folk magic, but were part of an organized satanic conspiracy to overthrow Christianity. Ladrede brought this fiery paranoia with him to Ireland. He saw heresy in every shadow and was determined to make his mark by stamping it out. When the disgruntled stepchildren brought him their story in 1324, he found his perfect case. He saw a chance to prosecute not just a potential murderer, but what he believed was a demonic conspiracy, with Alice Kyteler as its high priestess. Ladrede transformed a local dispute over money into a theological crisis. He took the accusations and shaped them into a set of 7 formal charges that were both sensational and terrifying. First, Alice and her followers had denied Christ. Second, they sacrificed animals to a demon named Robin, son of Ard, who would appear to Alice as a cat, a shaggy black dog, or a black man. It was from this demon, her incubus, that she allegedly received her wealth. Third, they used demons for prophecies. Fourth, they desecrated church sacraments in their rituals. Fifth, they brewed potions to incite love, hate, and kill, using ingredients like worms, spiders, and the hair of unbaptized boys, all boiled in the skull of a decapitated robber. Sixth, Alice had used this sorcery to murder her first 3 husbands and enchant her 4th, Sir John, into giving away his fortune. And finally, the charge that tied it all together. They were an organized coven of heretics. This was a landmark moment. For the first time in Europe, witchcraft was being prosecuted as heresy, an organized rebellion against God. But Alice Kyteler was not some defenseless outcast. She was one of the most powerful women in Ireland. Her son William was a wealthy banker. Her brother-in-law was Roger Utlack, the Chancellor of Ireland, the highest secular authority in the land. What happened next was an extraordinary power struggle. When Bishop Ladrede demanded the authorities arrest Lady Alice, he was refused. The Chancellor, her own relative, stalled. Infuriated, Ladrede excommunicated Alice anyway, and then charged her powerful son, William Outlaw, with heresy. This was a direct attack on Kilkenny's ruling class, and they pushed back. William, backed by his powerful friends, didn't just defy the bishop. He had him arrested and thrown in Kilkenny Castle for 17 days. The bishop only got out by placing the entire diocese under an interdict, a spiritual lockdown where no masses, marriages, or burials could happen until he was freed. The moment he was out, the bishop renewed his campaign, now more determined than ever. But while Alice and her powerful allies fought him in the courts, Ladrede knew there was another way to win his war. He couldn't get his hands on Lady Alice. So, he turned his attention to those he could, her servants. And at the top of that list was her maid, Petronilla de Meath. As Alice used her connections to stay one step ahead of the law, Bishop Ladrede's frustration grew. He had Alice's associates arrested, and he decided to make an example of her servant, Petronilla. Far from the eyes of powerful nobles, the bishop used the brutal tools of the Inquisition. He ordered Petronilla to be tortured. The records, written by Ledreed himself, state that Petronilla was first publicly flogged as a warning to everyone in Kilkenny. Then, in the dungeon, the real horror began. We can only imagine the agony she endured, but the result was exactly what the bishop wanted. She broke. Petronilla confessed to everything. She confirmed every lurid detail of the charges Ledreed had invented. Yes, she said, they had denied Christ. Yes, they sacrificed to the demon Robin. She told him of potions brewed in a thief's skull and of a magical ointment that, when rubbed on a wooden beam, allowed her and Lady Alice to fly through the night. Her confession, forced from her through unimaginable pain, was the weapon Ledreed needed. It was his proof. With that confession, Petronilla's fate was sealed. On November 3rd, 1324, she was led to a stake in the center of Kilkenny. Denounced as a heretic, she was burned alive, the first person in Irish history to die for the crime of heresy. Her agonizing death was a brutal message to anyone who dared defy the bishop. While her servant was being tortured and killed, Lady Alice Kyteler made her final move. It's clear her powerful friends had been working behind the scenes, using legal delays and political maneuvering as a diversion. While the bishop was focused on her associates, a plan was set in motion. Aided by her immense wealth and connections, Lady Alice Kyteler vanished. She fled Ireland, possibly to England or her family's homeland in Flanders, and then nothing. Lady Alice Kyteler disappears from all historical records. She was never caught, never punished, and was never heard from again. She simply slipped away, leaving behind a legacy of death, scandal, and a fortune built on 4 graves. With Alice gone, the vengeful Bishop Ledreed turned his attention to her son, William Outlaw. William was convicted of heresy, but his status still protected him from the fire. Instead, he was ordered to perform penance, attend Mass 3 times a day for a year, feed the poor, and pay for the entire roof of St. Canice's Cathedral to be re-leaded. A cripplingly expensive punishment, but one he survived. Others were not so lucky, suffering public floggings and excommunication. Bishop Ledreed had won, even if his main target got away. The Kilkenny witch trial of 1324 was a dark turning point. It was one of the first major trials in Europe to mix the crime of sorcery with the theological crime of heresy, creating the lethal combination that fueled the great witch hunts of the coming centuries. It provided a blueprint for hysteria, the demonic pact, the sexual relationship with a demon, the organized coven, and the use of torture to get a confession. All the terrifying stereotypes of a witch were forged in the case against Alice Kyteler. So we're left with the question, who was the real Lady Alice? Was she a cunning serial poisoner who used murder to climb the social ladder? Was she a genuine practitioner of some folk religion, whose rituals were twisted by a paranoid bishop into Satanism? Or was she simply an intelligent, independent, and ruthless businesswoman whose success made her a target? Was her real crime simply being a woman with too much power and too much money? We'll likely never know the truth. Alice vanished and took her secrets with her. But her story and the tragic fate of Petronilla became woven into the folklore of Kilkenny. To this day, the building that was once her home, now Kyteler's Inn, is said to be haunted by a sorrowful ghost. Some say it's Petronilla, unable to rest. Others believe it's the lady herself, her powerful spirit still tied to the source of her wealth. Her case is a chilling reminder of a time when ambition in a woman could be seen as demonic, when resentment could be weaponized into a charge of heresy, and when the line between law and terror was terrifyingly thin. It reminds us that behind the sensational tales of witches and demons often lies a much more human story of greed, power, and the horrific price paid by those who get in the way. If you thought the sight of a servant girl burned alive for her mistress's alleged witchcraft was horrifying, Wait until you hear the story of the emperor who turned hunger into a weapon, locking away his own family and starving them to death. Click above to witness the reign of terror of the emperor who starved his own family alive. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories from the shadowy corners of the past. What do you think? Was Alice Kyteler a killer, a witch, or a victim of her time? Let us know in the comments below.